House of Dynamite is the Big Mac and Fries version of World War III. Even if a nuke did go off in Chicago, the US government wouldn't be so helplessly spasmodic in its own response. Catherine Bigelow's House of Dynamite wants to be the thinking person's nuclear thriller, grim, serious and sober, but it's a bit too mainstream to achieve that.
The story begins with a single missile en route to Chicago. US detection systems have failed to determine the weapon's exact origin, but it appears to be North Korea. The film frames events such that the president must immediately decide whether to undertake massive retaliation. The Pentagon has denied cooperating on the Netflix production, though Bigelow herself says she worked closely with technical advisors in the security state. Internal documents from her Osama bin Laden movie, Zero Dark 30 from 2012, indicate she is willing to work closely with institutions like the CIA, but is wary not to associate her work too closely with such agencies. So, well, we'll see if she's being straightforward on that this time. In the real world, we're told constantly that Russia is testing NATO's resolve with drones made from wood and foam, and that these drift into NATO airspace for a few seconds and cause no casualties whatsoever. The notion that any state would suddenly escalate from toy hardware to dropping a nuclear weapon on the continental United States is far-fetched, short of a total tech and safeguards failure. But even if a nuke somehow did hit Chicago, the president wouldn't have to reach for the Denny's menu of retaliation options. For a start, there is no way to determine even whether the incoming object has a nuclear warhead until it's actually exploded. It could be conventional, a possibility left underexplored by the movie. After 9/11, effectively a decapitation strike attempt on America's political and military nerve centers, America refused to be bounced into instant reprisals. In fact, it very carefully avoided retaliation against the principal source of the problem, Saudi Arabia, and instead spent the next 18 months cynically building the case for war on the irrelevant nation of Iraq. If a nuclear weapon hit Chicago, the same principle would surely apply: identify, confirm, deliberate, and only then act. Bigelow avoids the overt jingoism of a film like Red Dawn, but that doesn't make the film's premise any less sensationalist. It dresses up as a critique of living in a house of dynamite, but doesn't really challenge nuclear policy. The film accepts the framework. America is the eternal target, the rational centre surrounded by maniacs, and then wrings its hands about the burden of command. Even the Pentagon, in an internal memo, said that the movie reinforces the need for an active missile defense system and highlights that deterrence can fail. That's an extraordinary endorsement of a film they claim they didn't advise on. If you want a more likely scenario that could actually lead to nuclear exchange, try these. The US or NATO hits Russia repeatedly with large conventional strikes. Russia, cornered, detonates a tactical nuke in Ukraine. Or Israel bombs Tehran and Iran fires back a volley of missiles, more than Israel realised it had, threatening to overwhelm its defences. Israel panics, miscalculates, and drops a nuke. Pakistan intervenes. Or China attacks Taiwan, which is too awkwardly situated geographically to receive conventional assistance from the United States. With the only other option being defeat, the US threatens to use nukes, and China, confident in its position, calls the West's bluff. Those are more likely pathways to nuclear meltdown, not a sudden mystery missile appearing out of nowhere over the Midwest. But engaging in those possibilities would alienate Bigelow's national security chums. House of Dynamite is an excellent drama. Bigelow always hits the mark. Idris Elba and Jared Harris are particularly memorable. Some of the dialogue is fabulous. On POTUS, for instance, they say, "They're all chronically late narcissists. At least this one reads a paper." And it's often touching. Rebecca Ferguson nails the cold functionary burying her feelings while clutching her kid's dinosaur. But as always, Hollywood is not interested in breaking a pleasurable illusion. Even when a film appears to criticise US policy, it typically reinforces core underlying assumptions. America is under siege. The film's estimated 10 million instant deaths is also about 10 times higher, by the way, than expert consensus. Decisions are noble and essential. Leaders are basically nice people doing their best. If a nuclear weapon ever did hit Chicago, the president would have hours, days, even weeks to think, and he'd surely use that time. Here, by ramping up a pretty silly scenario, Catherine Bigelow is subtly serving the military-industrial complex and doing nothing to promote the obvious solution: mutual disarmament.